April Ryan
Of theGrio.
of theGrio. Excuse me, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, sir.
I got it right last time we did this.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Mr. President, I have a couple of questions on several issues. One, the Supreme Court. As you know, the Supreme Court has before it the issue of college admissions and affirmative action. What can and are you planning in case of a rollback that is expected? There are legal analysts that say that there will be drastic implications, there are tentacles from this, and they even say that this could impact Brown v. Board, the decision from Brown v. Board.
Well, you know, first of all, I asked our Justice Department to defend the present policy before the Supreme Court. And like a lot of pundits, I'm not prepared to believe that the Supreme Court is going to overrule the existing decision. That's far from certain, and I don't believe that. But number one, what I did to try to change it is object to it before the Supreme Court of the United States, our administration. Number two, there are a number of things that we can and must do to make it. And by the way, this is a case involving an Asian American in terms of getting into school, and whether there's affirmative action makes sense at all from the standpoint of those who are arguing against it. But you know, the fact is that we're also in a circumstance where there's a lot that we can do in the meantime to make sure that there's an access to good education across the board. And that is by doing things that relate to starting education at age 3, formal schooling at age 3, which increases not daycare, but school. All the studies over 10 years show that that increases the prospect of someone making it through 12 years without any difficulty, no matter what the background they come from, by 56%. And I also think that we should be making sure that we have the ability to provide for 2 years of education beyond that, whether it's apprenticeships or community colleges. And we also are in a situation where I think that, for example, I want to make sure a lot of it has to do with finances as well, that we make sure that we have help for people who come from modest means to be able to get to school. You know, the cost of college education has increased fourfold. And it used to be that a Pell Grant would cover something like 70% of the college tuition. Now it covers significantly less than that. So I want to increase the Pell Grants as well. But let's see what the Supreme Court decides. And I am hopeful, and our team and the lawyers that argued for us are not nearly as certain as the people you quoted as saying it's going to be overruled.
Next question, sir. The issue is inflation. theGrio and KFF conducted a study of black voters that said inflation was the #1 issue, and we saw it in this midterm election. What can you promise concretely in these next 2 years that will help turn the pocketbook for the better in the midst of staving off a recession?
Well, a number of things. First of all, black unemployment is almost cut in half under my administration just since I began. More black businesses have opened up, small businesses, than ever before. We're now in a situation where we're providing, through the Small Business Administration, down payments for people buying homes, because most people accumulate wealth in the value of their home. Most middle-class families are like mine. My dad bought a home, didn't have it, just scraped together to get a home. By the time he was able to retire, he had built up equity in the home. That's how most people do that. But what I can't do is I can't guarantee that we're going to be able to get rid of inflation, but I do think we can. We've already brought down the price of gasoline about $1.20 a gallon across the board, and I think that the oil companies are really doing the nation a real disservice. Six of them made over $100 billion in the last quarter in profit. $100 billion. In the past, if they had done the two things that they have done before, one, invest in more refineries and producing more product, and or passing on the rebates to the gas stations. They sell the oil at a cheaper rate than they are selling it now, not taking advantage, and that lowers the price of the total gallon of gas because that gets passed on. So there's a whole lot of things that we can do that are difficult to do, but we're going to continue to push to do them. And the other thing is that one of the things that makes a gigantic difference is what are the costs that exist in the average family and average black community. One, prescription drug cost. Well, we're driving those down precipitously beginning next year. And, I'll bet a lot of people in the African American and Caucasian community that need to take insulin for diabetes. Well, we're going to be reducing that cost. They're not going to pay more than $35 for the insulin instead of average of $400. And I can go down the list of the things that my dad used to say it a different way. At the end of the month, the things you have to pay for, from your mortgage to food on the table to gasoline in the automobile, do you have enough money to do it? And when it's done, do you have anything left over? And medical bills are a big piece of that, particularly in the African American community and the poorer communities. They need help. And so we're driving down all of those costs, and we've already passed the legislation to do that. It's just taking effect. So there's a lot of things we can do to affect the things that people need on a monthly basis to reduce their inflation, their cost of living. But I am optimistic because we continue to grow and at a rational pace. We are not anywhere near a recession right now in terms of the growth, but I think we can have what most economists call a soft landing. I'm convinced that we're going to be able to gradually bring down prices so that they, in fact, end up with us not having to move into a recession to be able to get control of inflation.
And Mr. President, last question on humanity. Everybody else got some. Well, you're coming.
Okay, go ahead.
Last question on humanity. Sir, you can't legislate and you can't executive order out the issue of empathy or the lack thereof in the midst of this rhetoric, this heated political rhetoric. What's next?
Part of what I think leadership requires, and I hope I meet the standard, is letting people know you understand their problem. Again, my dad used to have an expression. He said, I don't expect the government to solve my problems, but I expect them to at least know what they are, understand them. And like a lot of you, we've been very fortunate as a family, but we've also been through a lot of fairly tough times. And I've had the great advantage of having a family to get through them. When my first wife and daughter were killed when a tractor trailer broadsided them and killed my wife and killed my first wife and killed my daughter, and my two boys are expected to die. It took the jaws of life 3 hours to get them out there on top of their dead mother and dead sister. I understand what that pain's like. And when Jill and I lost Bo after a year in Iraq, winning the Bronze Star Conspicuous Service Medal, a major in the United States military, came home with stage 4 glioblastoma because he lived about between 200 and 500 yards from a burn pit that's 10 feet deep and as big as a football field, burning every toxic waste you could find. I think that we understand what it's like to lose family members, mothers, fathers to cancer. All of you have been through that kind of thing. We've been fortunate, though. We've had each other. We've had strong families, Jill's sisters, my brothers, my sister. And so what we can do to deal with that empathy is make sure there's help available. Make sure there's people who are there to help, whether they are psychologists or whether they're medical doctors or whether they're social workers, to be there to help just hold a hand. And for example, we can do an awful lot for a lot of families, the families you're talking about, if we reinstate this child tax credit. It cut child poverty by 40%. When it was in place. I couldn't get it passed the second time around. So there's a lot we can do. And the empathy is not just talking about it, it's communicating to people you genuinely understand. And I hope a lot of people don't understand because I don't want people having to know the pain. But the second piece of that is let them know that you are there to help. You're there to help. And one of the things I've talked with Vivek Murthy about, and a lot of you have written about it, and you've written it well about it, is the need for mental health care in America. You know, when we got elected, there were something like, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 million people who gotten their COVID shots. Well, in the meantime, I got over 220 million people, all 3 shots. But in the meantime, what happened? We lost over 1 million dead. 1 million dead. I read one study that for those 1 million people, they had 9 people who were, each one had averaged 9 people close to them. A relative, someone they're married to, a child, someone close. The impact has been profound. Been profound. Think of all the people, think of all your children and your grandchildren who didn't have that senior prom, who didn't have that graduation party, who didn't have all the things we had that we took for granted, that impact on their psyche. So there's a lot we have to do. And empathy reflects itself not just in what a person demonstrates they understand, of knowing what people need and helping to make it happen. And we're trying to do that. And a lot of Republicans trying to do it too. I don't mean this is a partisan thing. A lot of people are trying to do it because they know we got a problem.